I'm Charlie, this is Neha, and this is Real Talk. And today we're talking about P Diddy and Justin Bieber's relationship. So, obviously, as we all know, the P Diddy case is kind of like everywhere right now. You can't really escape it on your socials.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to kind of like rerun back through exactly what he's been charged with. He's been charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The first two charges come with potential maximum sentences of life in prison. I mean, for anyone, I didn't really know what racketeering meant, to be honest, before kind of looking into this. And what kind of the legislation and law says is that it's any illegal activity for profit that is disguised as legitimate business dealings. So, I mean, that alongside the sex trafficking and kind of all of this coercion, it paints a really dark picture.
Yeah, 100%. It's very like premeditated, right? Like these aren't the kind of
100%.
things that you just do on the cuff. Like you plan out these things, and it's very like illegitimate. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that this has been going on for so long, and I think he probably thought that he was kind of clear. I feel like when you're doing something, for like decades, you're not going to think that you're ever going to get in trouble. Like you're going to reach a point where you're, I can breathe now. And that's when they get you.
With kind of some of the charges, obviously, we're seeing like a lot of stories come to light. I literally saw some news headlines this morning from new allegations that are coming forward. And I think one of the grossest things that I've been reading about is this whole concept of like the freak-offs that happened. The freak-offs were these basically sex parties where P. Diddy would hire kind of male and female sex workers predominantly of like all different ages. I know some of them are quite young. And get them to engage in these like day-long like sex parties almost, where they would be basically performing for him. And it's just like when you hear these kinds of stories, it just really reaffirms this idea again of like him feeling so untouchable. And when you reach a certain level of fame, status, wealth, whatever it is, you do begin to emulate this sense of invincibility. And he obviously thought that he could have whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. I mean, what was it, like 1,000? Was it 1,000 or 10,000 bottles?
It was
of
1,000.
1,000 bottles of baby oil in his house.
In his home. Like, why are you keeping those
First
bottles?
Of all, an environmental hazard.
Like, what's
That's
going
not
on?
biodegradable.
No.
Like, he has got a lot of plastic on his hands.
No, it's ridiculous. And yeah, to go back to your point about the freak-offs, I mean, the fact that they were like completely drug-induced, the fact that they'd have to go on like an IV drip for days afterwards to recover. I mean, like shows you that Diddy really didn't view people as people anymore. Like when you reach that point of like invincibility, everyone is a means to an end. And
everything is like never enough. Like, I think it's also the level of exploitation as well, because there have been a lot of kind of stories coming out of, he was, obviously, this is all kind of speculative, but given what we know, it's not really a hard, far-reaching possibility. He was being extremely sexually coercive and violent towards like very young people.
I mean,
like there was a news article today about a 10-year-old
boy. I know.
And it's kind of like, again, just really hones in how evil this person was, because you obviously have to be very, very evil to be kind of entertaining any of this.
And so that obviously leads us on to
JB.
With Justin, I feel like, okay, let's go over the timeline of their relationship. So obviously Justin was discovered by Scooter Braun, he who almost shall not be named.
Not a fan of the show.
No. And yeah, so in 2008, when Justin was literally like 14 years old, discovered him on YouTube.
Baby
I know, so sweet. And I really feel like to go from being like, really, you know, his family, like his mother was a drug addict, his father was not around, his grandmas and his grandpa like really looked after him, he was very poor, like to go from having nothing to suddenly like being flown wherever you want and having all of these like old men, like these old straight white men, like
so many adults,
right?
It's crazy the lack of safeguarding that
I know.
when you think about it.
No, it's so insane. And then like when you're young, you literally have everything, like you have the whole world handed to you on a plate. Like it's going to be so tricky to be able to find a path like out of that. And I really feel like there's a lot of responsibility that needs to be placed onto his parents for the things that Justin has gone through. I find it really, really disappointing that Patty Millett, Justin's mother, was just nowhere to be seen. Obviously, she was going through her own thing. She was a really young mother at 15 years old, like completely can't even imagine that.
She had very little support.
Yeah, exactly. And like with like, you know, drug issues and stuff like that. But I just think it's such a shame that she kind of just let, you know, the industry and other people
I think with that whole thing, I definitely agree. I think obviously we've been having so many more conversations over the past kind of few years about child actors, child stars. Like obviously there was the whole Dan Schneider Nickelodeon thing. There's been a load of Disney stars have come forward and spoken about how they were treated. And I do think that I agree with you in the sense of 100%. The family should have acted differently and put more boundaries in place regarding who Justin was with, where he was going. He was very often, I think, away from any close guardian and kind of just off on his own with these strangers. But I think there was probably a level of naivety of like, nothing bad's going to happen. Because I think maybe we didn't know what we know now. Which is so naive because 100% there have always been predators and there have always been people who are going to take advantage of young people. Like that's fucking tale as old as time. But
it's a different world.
I do think, like nowadays, there's so much better safeguarding for people in that industry at that age. And I mean, like, when someone like Usher, who is one of the biggest stars in the world, comes over to your little Canadian home and is like, I'm going to make your son a star. You probably trust him. You're probably like, okay, Usher.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
Like,
let's do it.
Be my guest. Let's do it. And I think it's crazy and it makes me feel so sad on Justin's behalf of the rooms that he was likely in where he didn't have anyone looking out for him.
No, not at all. And I agree with you. It all happened so fast and it was just such a new phenomenon at that time, so like you kind of have no reason to question it. But I do think as the years went on, I'm kind of like, where were you? Like she's just nowhere to be seen. I do think that that's a big part of like I just think, Justin did not have the right support around him. Okay, so obviously he meets Usher, he meets Scooter Braun, gets scouted by him, then Scooter puts him in touch with Usher. He's like literally was like, you know, covering Usher's songs on his YouTube channel. So he's probably like absolutely starstruck. And obviously Usher has had a long history of a relationship with P Diddy. Usher was discovered by P Diddy, was mentored by P Diddy, and there's a lot of kind of allegations and stuff kind of saying that Usher himself was abused by P Diddy and was taken advantage of. And I think that's quite interesting, that conversation of how, you know, like Usher said that number one, he would never let any of his kids go over to P Diddy's house. Like that says a lot, considering that Usher was so young when he met him. And also that Usher kind of has gone on record to say that a lot of the things that happened when he was younger with P Diddy, he didn't have the ability, he wasn't old enough to understand what he was actually experiencing or looking at. So I think it's very clear to say that like a lot of weird stuff happened. And I think that as Usher got older, he became part of the problem. Like I think he definitely was taken advantage of, but I think he kind of grew up to then kind of be like, okay, this is how it's going to go. Like, this is what happened to me. This is how it's going to go. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think with their relationship and then obviously also what we've seen kind of the resurfaced clips of Justin with P Diddy. I mean, there's the one that kind of everyone has been circulating and talking about, which is the one where they're talking about Justin's birthday and spending a wild 48 hours together. That, it sends like shivers down my spine, because the way that P Diddy is, and obviously given what we know, you're going to look into it in a very specific way, because we know now that he's a predator. So when you watch that video, you watch it with a certain lens, but just like the way he's looking at Justin, the way Justin looks, the way that they're talking about this concept of like, I haven't got guardianship over him, but like for the next 48 hours, like we're gonna have a wild time.
It's so weird.
It's so creepy. And he's a teenager. He's a child. He looks like a fetus. Like Justin, up until the age of about 19, looked like a fetus with that hair. Bless him. So like, it just makes you question everything.
And I feel like even without knowing what we know now, I feel like it's still kind of weird. Like I felt maybe we didn't realize it because like you don't pick up on it, but I think even if we didn't know, if Diddy was out walking free and no one knew anything right now, I think watching those videos, there is an underlying sense of uncomfortableness that you can feel regardless of what you know. And like, it's just, there's so many things like that. Like there's obviously the interview, he was on Jimmy Fallon and he was like, you know better than to talk about like what you do with your uncle Diddy like on like TV. It's like, like, there's no reason for you to be saying that unless you're doing nefarious stuff. Yeah. And like, I 100%, yeah, like Justin's reaction, all of these videos, there's countless of them. Like, he's just kind of like so awkward. And you know, the one where he's like, oh, why don't you hang out with me anymore? Like, you've changed. Like, it's just it's so sad, because to me, like, there is no doubt in my mind that Justin was taken advantage of in multiple ways by P Diddy and Usher. And like, you're not a young person spending so much time around people like that, where you are a money making machine. Like, Justin was a cash machine. Like, there's no way that they're going to leave you alone. And like, it's just
and we know that Diddy was having those white parties,
and Justin was there.
And Khloe Kardashian said back in the day, I think it was like in the kind of mid 2010s, that when they had gone to some of these parties and Justin Bieber had been there, he wasn't even 21 yet. But we knew that Justin was in these circles. He was going to these parties. It was like naked parties. Like, I don't know. It's just, it makes you second guess and take another look at why Justin's behaviour ended up becoming as destructive as it did. Yeah. Which is, I think, something that a lot of people have been doing recently, is kind of like going back. He got so much hate. Like, there was a period in time where I even was like, he's fucking annoying.
No, for sure.
Like, carrying that monkey around. Just being, like, absolute little psychopath. Like, there was a good stint of time where Justin's kind of like bad boy behaviour was really, really looked down upon, because he was considered such like an idol and aspirational in so many ways. And a lot of people probably had this mindset of like, how dare you take what you've been given and
squander it.
Yeah, exactly. But it kind of insinuates, now knowing what we know, that this boy was going through it.
When, I mean, I was a hardcore believer, like I still am, I don't know what to say.
But
I was like deep in the trenches at that time, like the last 10 years of my life. Anyway, so I remember at the time, like, very obviously knowing, like, realizing that is him lashing out. Like, that is like, all of that behavior is him lashing out. And I think that's a result of, I think, a lot of the things that people used to say about him, a lot of the ridicule, like, really affected him, because he was still a child, you know. And I think at the same time, having whatever was going on behind the scenes with Diddy and all of the kind of older people in his life, I think that completely changes your brain chemistry. Like, I think people forget that he was literally a child, to the point where, like, you know, you're still, like, your most formative years are happening while you're, like, having God knows what happened to you behind closed doors, having public ridicule, being in a situation where you're so famous that no one's saying no to you, right? Like, I think that's a big part of the problem. I think Justin himself has gone on record to say that, like, he had yes men all around him. Like, anything he wanted, like, there was no one in the world that would ever say no to anything that he wanted. And so when you're young and you're dealing with all those things, you lose sight of like who you really are, what you actually need to do to live, you know, a healthy, like, happy life. Yeah, exactly like that. And like, that's also where that, you know, depression and that sadness comes in. I think we really see that come through in 2015 when he was kind of doing all of these like really like, you know, illegal, criminal, like acting out kind of things and having just a really like nasty attitude. I think that completely was him just not knowing how to deal with like everything that was putting on top of him as he was getting older and transitioning. Because I think who you are when you're like, you know, 21 is so different to who you are when you're 26. Like, there's so many like formative years there, so it's so sad. And I think, you know, Justin's had so many health issues in recent years. No, I know. I feel like he can never catch a break,
honestly.
So he was diagnosed with Ramsay Hunt syndrome.
That was the face
the face paralyzing, because
it looks like you've had a stroke, and it does completely change one side of your face for a hot minute, and then just as time goes on, and it just kind of like
obviously he also had Lyme disease, so
very debilitating.
Very debilitating. It completely affects your quality of life. I think that obviously aided a lot of his, obviously he had to stop his world tour, his Justice world tour, and I think he was definitely like very like depressed and really affected his mental health. I really don't know if we'll ever see him perform on such a large arena like to his fans. Now there is kind of a bit of a theory said by Freddie P, who used to be one of Diddy's band members, who basically said that Diddy has engaged like in medical warfare, that like a lot of people around him that have gotten sick or have been severely like ill. He said that Jamie Foxx got sick and that was kind of Diddy's doing, that obviously Kim Porter was ill and she obviously inevitably died, and that Justin Bieber being ill was Diddy's doing. While we're talking about conspiracy theories, there's a pretty big one in relation to Justin, Diddy, and all of the jazz.
Are we going to talk about the Yummy video?
Oh my God, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize you knew everything.
I'm jumping the gun. Yeah. Stuff like this is when I love social media and like TikTok specifically, because the people put the work in.
No,
so
honestly,
we don't have to.
give me the info.
Like, honestly, a bullet pointed like picture carousel of like every single thing that went on in that video. I mean, the Yummy video is kind of iconic for a number of reasons, but obviously the whole kind of metaphor of that video is kind of exploitation in a way. Because I think so obviously, basically, if you haven't already seen, there are tons of TikTok videos, tweets, YouTube videos, all kind of dissecting the Yummy video and pointing out some kind of like eerie signs in it that point to potentially JB's relationship with P Diddy and some of the pretty nasty stuff that will have gone on
like
behind
it was
closed doors.
Easter egged within the video.
Very Easter egg. That was what I was looking for. So, because the first thing that happens is he comes out of the kitchen, which people take as like he's one of the meals.
He's surprised.
In a way of he's being served on a platter for others' entertainment. Straight off the bat, we're like, okay, diving in. And then there are lots of other things. There's, for example, the kids who are dressed up as adults playing like violins and cellos. They're performing for everyone, the entertainment again. There's all of the people who are sat around on the tables. A lot of them were wearing like crowns, very decadent, kind of reaffirming this idea of wealth and these very important celebrities and rich people. It's painting a picture much like the Diddy parties.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's kind of undeniable. I feel like there's a lot of, I mean, also like the sandwich on the table.
That one took me I'm not gonna lie, I felt so dumb because for a while I was like, what's happening? Like when they were explaining like the cherry and I know. I didn't get it.
Like I feel like, so that's one example where I feel like that's a bit more convincing than some of the other examples as to this kind of being the point of the video. Because to me, I feel like that's such a specific choice. Like in the video, when Justin's sitting at a table, he's given this sandwich on his plate and it's kind of like stacks of bread that kind of have almost like a bit of a hollow in the middle, and then there's these like two pieces of bread that are almost like covering it at the front, but the way that the camera angle pans is to the side of him, and you can see within that kind of hollowness in the pieces of bread there's a cherry placed there, and then obviously you have the bread in front that's got like a little smiley face on it.
What do you think the symbolism of that one is?
So I think the symbolism, definitely kind of that cherryness is like that innocence, right? Like having
like pop your cherry.
Like pop your cherry, you know, like cherry on top. The cherry kind of represents innocence and kind of youth, and I think that having desirable youth. Yeah, exactly. Like something that you want, like something that's very like good that you kind of want to like damage maybe. And I think having the kind of sandwich be in the position that it is, covering that cherry, is kind of a signal to, and having the smiley face out on the front is kind of a signal to how Justin maybe himself was trying to protect himself, or that, you know, other people were trying to protect Justin from kind of almost the inevitable, which is like the consumption of such things. So yeah, I think that it's just a very on purpose decisions to have those two things there, because you're not gonna have a cherry sandwich, like what's going on, like. So I definitely think that was just a little bit more confusing in the video than some of the other things. But I do agree that like having, you know, the kids on stage in adult clothing playing instruments, like it's a very clear visualization.
He had to put in a couple metaphors for us dum-dums, okay? Not everyone was going to get the cherry sandwich thing. There had to be a couple more obvious ones for us who were just watching him and not trying to look for the symbolism of it all.
You said it, not me. Another quite odd thing about that video was that on the table that he was sitting, obviously there's like lots of different food things, but there's also loads of cheese puffs, just kind of randomly like there. And obviously P Diddy is also known as Puff Daddy. Puff is his nickname. So yeah, I think that's quite a bit more of an obvious symbolism of like what could be going on, because they were kind of random, like they were just kind of on the table for no reason.
I do think the end scene where he's eating the cake off of that plate, and once the cake kind of goes away, you see that it's a photo of like him as a child on the plate. That's like boom, in your face. I was being served up as a child. Like I was the thing that they were consuming. That's like a very, very in-your-face symbol.
For sure. It almost gave me like a funeral director program. Like it gave me like a funeral program vibe, that picture. Do you get what I mean? Like it's got this weird kind of like eeriness.
Like we lost him too young.
Yeah, like it's almost like he's still alive, but he's gone. Like, do you know what I mean? It's weird. I think that video, with all of these kind of symbolism and all these things in it, I think those things are done on purpose. And I don't think that it was Justin making those decisions for the video. Like I think his team very much decided a lot of those specific things that were in the video that people are calling attention to.
When you think about it like that, and if it is kind of true and accurate, which I think it probably is, the fact that his team had a much bigger say in things than he did, it just kind of hones in this concept again that he's never actually escaped that exploitation. Yeah, exactly. It's just been from different people. It's just being passed from one team to the other, or by one person to another. And I think even now, it's like he's a father, he's a husband, like he's a grown-ass man. And he will likely still be facing those forms of exploitation in one way or another. And I don't know if he'll ever actually escape it, given what he's gone through. If you've been affected by anything that we discussed during the length of the podcast, there will be resources and links below in the description box.